And good day, everyone, and thanks for joining our live stream. We are broadcasting live right now on LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. So welcome to people from all of our audiences. We're going to be talking for the next half hour about landing the remote or hybrid job that you really want. I think this is going to be a fascinating discussion. We are going to be taking your questions live throughout the program. So if you have a question, please use the comments box and type it in, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we possibly can. And with that, we're going to jump right into it. And let me move to our next slide. And let me bring in, here we go. There's John Gates from salarycoach.com. John, welcome. Thanks for joining the program.
I appreciate the invite, Jim. It's always fun to talk with you, and we always have great conversations. So I hope that this will be fun for you and for me and for everybody that's participating.
I think this is going to be fascinating. Just an awful lot. I thought we'd talk just for a few seconds about just kind of the state of the job marketplace. Very complex. A lot of technology being thrown at the problem, AI, applicant tracking, virtual interviews, a heavy desire for that from the job seekers for hybrid and remote jobs, and a growing push or desire by companies to bring people back to the ranch. So that's we're going to talk about in some depth today. Let me move into this one and bring up our first question of the day, which is, why do you think it's getting more difficult to land a hybrid or remote job today? A lot of discussion about this on social media platforms.
Oh, I'm glad that you asked that, Jim. I think it's a bit of a numbers game because you have major corporations and even smaller companies post-pandemic bringing people back to the office. So they call this an RTO mandate, which means return to office or something like that. A lot of CEOs have come down with that edict, like you have to come back, whether it's come back 3 days a week or come back 5 days a week or some combination of those things. Companies are bringing people back into the office. Meanwhile, I think people who have worked remote during the pandemic decided, I really like this. I like the freedom of it. I like that I don't have to sit in traffic for a long period of time. I like the aspect of working from home. And so the demand to work from home or the demand to work remotely is on the rise, while the supply of those jobs is on the shrink. Yeah. So I think that's where we are. And that's why it is harder and harder to find the hybrid and remote opportunities, especially the remote opportunities.
I was checking with ChatGPT before we went on the air, and 2022, coming off the pandemic, 34% of the jobs were remote. In 2025, it's down to 15%. So it's definitely gone down. But surprisingly, hybrid has gone up substantially. It was 25% in 2022, up to 44% in 2025. Yeah. And so what's interesting is the net difference is the same. Off-site, if you consider both, was 59% in 2022, and it's 59% today, which that really fascinated me.
Yeah. That is fascinating, actually. And I think being on the inside of some of those conversations, sitting in corporate HR meetings, talking about how should we message this? How should this happen? I think in some cases, those companies landing on hybrid opportunities are an attempt to compromise, to soften the blow. Because corporate HR teams are warning executives there's going to be a revolt. There's going to be a massive dive in employee satisfaction. There's going to be turnover. There's going to be all these things. And so the compromise move is to offer a hybrid opportunity where you need to be in the office a couple of days a week. Maybe we can coordinate that so the whole team is in the office on the same day, and we can gain the benefits of maybe collaboration or the things that they think they're going to get from in-person opportunities, while still maintaining a little bit of this feeling that you can work from home some of the time. What it eliminates, though, is this idea that you could live completely away from the office. Yeah. If you have to be in the office a couple of days a week, 2-3 days a week, you can't live 4 hours from the office or in a different state. So you have to be semi-local for that.
Yeah, agreed. Still, it's a nicer way to work. It gives you some flexibility, which I think people find very, very attractive. Let's move on to our next topic, because I want to get to questions from the audience. So what's motivating? What do you think is the number one motivator? Why companies are so they want to bring everyone back to or as many people as they can back to the office.
Yeah, I've heard different things. I think there's what people say, and I think there's what people really want.
Mm.
And I don't think that they're telling you what they really want.
Hmm.
So what they say is, we're paying all this money for corporate real estate, we need to be using it. What they say is, we like the idea of impromptu collaboration. So you pass somebody in the hallway, you have a quick discussion. You sit with somebody, or you see them in the company cafeteria, and you walk up to them and you have a quick discussion. Those kind of things are a little more difficult in a remote environment where you might have to schedule interactions with people. And so this impromptu collaboration doesn't, has a harder time. But that's kind of a myth, because you have things like Slack, you have things like Teams, where you can real time message people. It shows if they're available to chat, and you can ask the quick question, and you can do the virtual passing in the hallway sort of a thing. So I think that the real reason, and this is going to be a little bit controversial, but I make no apologies for this. This is really the truth. Leaders don't know how to manage remote employees.
Mm.
You and I, we grew up in an era where everyone was in the office, and most of the leaders that are in leadership positions also grew up like in an era where you could look over to the desk and see if somebody's nose was in the screen. And the assumption is, in some leaders, if I can see you working, then you must be working. And if I can't see you working, then it puts this question mark in my mind. Are you working? And so I think you have to have a completely different style of leadership and management when you're managing remote people and you can't see them working. There's this shift you have to make into monitoring their results instead of monitoring their activity or their presence or something like that. I think you'd be shocked to find that most leaders today don't really have the muscles in their they don't have the arrows in their leadership quiver to set out goals, to have a system to monitor activity, to manage and monitor results. It's just more difficult, and they don't want to make that shift. They don't want to make that change. They're used to what's made them successful for 20 years, and it's hard to change. So I think that's among the real reasons for bringing people back to the office.
So you mentioned kind of traditionally the way things, and this kind of parlays right into this question that just came in from one of our attendees, John Bergdahl. It seems that the request for cover letters is diminishing. Is that your sense? And is AI reading cover letters? Are cover letters even worth writing?
I love this question from you, John. Thanks for asking it. Cover letters, like I was one of those recruiters that never read the cover letter. So if somebody put a cover letter together, I wouldn't read it because, first of all, I didn't have time. But secondly, I just wanted the resume to stand on its own. I don't want you to try to convince me that you're a fit. I want to discern that from the resume, and that was my way of evaluating things. And so there are two camps of recruiters in the world. There are ones that always read the cover letter and ones that never read it. There aren't really some that sometimes read it. You're in one camp or the other. And I think most recruiters don't read them. I don't think that AI is reading them. So the question is, are they worth writing? I think if you've got a story to tell and your resume doesn't tell it well, you could do that, but there's a big chance it won't be read anyway.
Yeah. What's interesting is why do so many companies ask for a cover letter? It seems like the vast majority ask for a cover letter. And
yeah, I think some do. I'm not sure it's the vast majority. Okay. You probably notice it when you're applying, and that
yes,
is the vast majority, but I don't think so. Like, especially now that AI is in the mix, AI can write the cover letter very quickly.
Yeah.
And as soon as companies figure it out, and they've probably figured it out already, that AI is just writing all these things.
I saw an interesting comment on LinkedIn yesterday. From, I believe it was a recruiter or a hiring manager. And she said that if she was able to determine that your cover letter was written by AI, she was immediately pulling you out of the job search pile.
Really?
So, wow. That's punitive.
Yeah. I could see some people saying that, but like I wouldn't do that if I was a recruiter. If I thought the cover letter was written by AI, I would think, well, okay, at least the person knows how to use AI. But it introduces a bunch of skepticism. Is this cover letter legit and authentic, or is it a bunch of BS? And I think most of the time it's the latter.
Mm.
So that's why I kind of dismiss them. I don't value them very much. I never valued them in the past before AI, and now that AI is here, I value them even less. So
What are your thoughts on video? Yeah, when part of the recruiting process is to you record a video for them to look at?
sure, I think it depends. I've deployed that technology. What really annoys me is when a company says, um, record a video using the technology of your choice. Now, like the candidate has to go off and figure out how the heck are they going to record this video, and then clunky submission process. That is a horrible thing to ask a candidate to do.
It's a lot of work.
There are some technologies that plug right in. It's like, yeah, click here to say hi to us. I think that's okay. Click here to tell us in 90 seconds why we should hire you. I think that's probably okay. Um, it feels a little awkward as a candidate. Um, some of them will actually ask you screening questions.
Hmm.
Now, I think that's bad if you haven't met a human yet.
Yeah.
So um, when I'm working with companies and helping them to reconfigure their recruiting process, you can have a system ask screening questions on video, and that's okay. But I think you should have a recruiter talk to the person and say, I like your resume. I want to learn more about you. This is how we're going to do that efficiently. So let me tell you what's coming. And like, I'm going to watch the answers. The hiring manager is going to see the answers. And if you do that, I think candidates will do a lot of things as long as they know that they're in the running. But like if you front load the application so that it turns into a 1 hour long nightmarish exercise, and there's a big chance you won't even get a call or talk to anybody at all, like that's a huge turnoff, and it's a big mistake that companies make, I think.
Gotcha. All right, let's move on to the next topic, which is local candidates. So, after the pandemic or during the pandemic, and it held on, it was this dramatic interest in working offsite, remotely, sometimes not even nowhere near the company. You're on the company's on the West Coast. I want to be on the East Coast. But increasingly, well, no, I can't say increasingly, but there are instances now where you're seeing local candidates are being suited in these job postings. What do you think about that?
Local candidates as opposed to someone who must relocate to if they accept the job.
Well, what I find interesting is I'm not sure exactly what it means. I think it means ultimately they prefer that you're on site locally. But I think that's laying out hybrid local. But that means,
Sure.
Again, you have to live within driving distance of the office, right?
Yeah, I think that's okay, because if that's what it means, then local candidates that are within the local proximity right now and can meet the schedule requirements, that's not terrible, but it can be discriminatory as well. Like there have been laws passed, successful lawsuits challenged and stuff like that to say companies have said must live within 3 miles of the office. You cannot require that. And there have been companies in the past that said we require that because we know that 4 miles away is this bad ethnic neighborhood and we don't want to hire anybody that lives there, right?
Yeah.
So that's awful. But in the past, that's been exposed through lawsuits. And so you can't do that. But this idea that you have to be within a reasonable driving distance of the office is not terrible, because if you live outside and that becomes a grind, you're more likely to be a turnover risk. And that's a real thing. Like people leave office all the time. They quit one job and go to another because it's closer to home. That's a legit common reason for quitting a job. Now, if it's the other thing and they want people who already live in the area and they don't want a a relocating person. It's another idea. They're trying to reduce their risk. They're trying to reduce their cost. It's their way of saying we can't pay for the relocation. We have no budget for that. So don't expect that. And we think if you're moving from one state to another, what if you don't like it here? What if you don't integrate here? Maybe you have no family support here, no friends here yet, I don't know, but that's probably the fear of the employer behind that requirement is all that. So if let's say you live in Texas and you're planning to move to North Carolina, that's where your family is, your parents are, that's just really where you want to be. And you run into this requirement that all applicants must be local. Well, you can get a PO box, or you can get a temporary address that is local and put that on your resume and just work around, right? And then you're relocating yourself, and nobody ever needs to know that you aren't a local. Like, in your mind, you're already there and you have reasons for wanting to be there. So I think that's a reasonable workaround for people.
Interesting. How about, and I've seen this in job posts where applicants must reside in certain states. Why do they do that?
They do that often because the payroll and legal employment requirements vary from state to state. And let's say you have a person who lives in Colorado and can actually work remotely. It's a remote job, or even California. California is a good example. The wage and hour laws of California are onerous. They are difficult. It's an extremely pro-employee state. The tax structures and everything like that are difficult, and because of that, some employers are choosing not to employ anybody from the state of California because they can more easily be sued. To comply with California payroll and employment laws is more difficult, and you have to comply with those laws where the employee lives, not where your business operates. So it's really the payroll thing more than anything else. In order to employ somebody in the state of Oregon, for example, where I live, you have to have a business entity in the state of Oregon so that you can employ me in Oregon and pay the Oregon state employment taxes and everything else. Some companies migrate then to a payroll service company like ADP, who can employ somebody directly in any state. But then you're an employee of ADP being leased back to the parent company. That's a way of getting around it. It's just kind of an administration issue. It's an administration and compliance issue.
Gotcha.
That is why.
Let's talk about this one. So you see a job posting and it's on site, and you don't want to work on site. Does it happen? Is it possible to convert an on-site job to hybrid or remote? How often?
It is possible. It is difficult, especially if they're saying on-site only in the application. That means we've already decided we want this person to be on site, and there are legitimate reasons for that. So if you need remote or hybrid, you should screen yourself out. But if it doesn't specify, or it seems kind of light, or we prefer on-site or something like that, you can go through the process. In the screening call, they'll probably ask you, are you willing to work on-site, things like that. And it's if they screen you on that and you say yes, then it's hard to unplug from that without seeming like you led them on, you misled them in some way. And that's going to be trouble for you down the road. But let's just say you're going through the process and then they offer you the job and they never really asked you. And they said, okay, the job requires you to be on site Monday through Friday, or Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, or something. And you can accept it or you can decline it. You can test this and you can probe and you can say, well, is it possible for me to have a slightly different remote thing? Or I have this family commitment that I have to deal with, or I prefer options where I'm working from home on Tuesdays and Thursday or a couple of days a week. Is it possible for us to work that out? Could we try it on a trial basis or something like that? And the answer is going to be yes or no. It's either possible or it's not possible. But I think that's a safe way at the offer stage to see what can, what could be possible, what could happen there. So yeah, it is possible. Here's another way of doing it. And this is kind of off the beaten track. People are less concerned about consultants and contractors adhering to the in-office requirements. If you're a contractor and you're there to solve a specific problem, or you get this contract gig and you live in another state, or you are just coming in a couple of days a week to meet with key people and then going back and doing the work at the office. And that seems to be okay when you're a contractor, and then they want to convert you to full time. And now you have to adhere to the policy. You can kind of slide into grandfathering the schedule because you've already proven that it can work. So this is one strategy for getting remote and hybrid work. If a company doesn't offer it, is to begin as a contractor and offer to fix a problem. But, you're an independent contractor. I feel like I need to be in the office for key meetings, but I don't need to be in the office, and you don't have to provide me a desk or a space. And we can see if that's going to work.
Interesting. I had one quick thought. There are companies popping up that are 100% remote. There is no office.
Yep.
Everyone is working remotely, and they seem to be getting some traction. They seem to be growing, hiring people. So why is that working?
Well, I think it's working because they have cracked the code on how to effectively lead and manage people that they can't see all the time. That gets back to that first point that I made. And so I think companies that can do that and want to do that are going to have a tremendous competitive advantage. Here's why. First of all, you can employ anybody from anywhere. If let's say you are a Boston company and you hire only remote people, and there's another Boston company that you compete with that hires only local people. The company in Boston that hires the only local people, they're restricted to the talent pool of Boston.
Yeah.
That's where you live, Jim, right? So they can only hire people who live in Boston. And if there is a Larry Bird, if Larry Bird lives in Indiana and you can't hire Larry Bird, but the company that is fully remote can and will hire Larry Bird because Larry wants to work remotely. As we already mentioned, the number of remote jobs is shrinking.
Yeah.
And you have one. And so you get the pick of the very best talent across a broader area. The overall quality of people working for you is going to be significantly higher. And we both know it's not company strategy that produces results. It's the people who produce the company strategy and the people working the strategy that produce the results. So I think that the long-term, companies that know how to do this, that can learn how to do this, embrace this, are going to outpace, outwork, outshine, out-innovate the companies that don't want to make this shift. That's just my opinion, and I think that's going to be borne out over time, I think
you're right. Which leads us into this one. I love this slide. It's people working in, islands, on a cruise ship with a beautiful view. They're in their favorite coffee shop. And I think this is, popular question among our audience. How do they achieve the hybrid or remote lifestyle that they're dreaming about? Right? This is the time to do it, right?
Yeah. I love this question because I dream about that same lifestyle, and I've actually built a business that allows me to live that lifestyle. Like right now, I'm not in Oregon, I'm in Minnesota. The backdrop behind me is an Airbnb. I'm traveling and I'm living the dream. I can actually do what I do from any location in the world as long as I have a decent internet connection
Yeah.
and can meet with people and collaborate in a Zoom call or something. So there are several ways, right? One is to identify the companies that are willing to do remote. But for as long as you're an employee, you're going to be subject to the decisions of other people.
Mm.
So the company that has a completely remote workforce could get a new CEO who has a different idea about that.
Mm.
And you could then all of a sudden be living in Fiji and discover that you have to be in Chicago 3 days a week. Oops. So you're going to have to quit that job and then find another one of those rare remote opportunities. And that could be a little challenging.
Yeah.
I think this is going to result in a rise of the gig economy. And what I mean by that, I think more and more people that want this lifestyle are going to go into contracting, where they do project work. They built a skill that they can sell. And so if you want to do this, that's probably a viable path. Do you have a skill that you can sell, or do you solve specific problems that are expensive problems for companies to have? Does that require you to be on site to solve the problem? Can you fly in, meet with a few people, fly out, do some of the work, fly back in? Those are the kind of things you have to ask yourself. So you could contract, you could become a contractor or a gig worker, and I think that's a viable path, but you have to have a skill that you can sell.
Mm.
The second option I think that's pretty good is you could start a consulting business or some sort of business of your own that you've structured to be location independent. And sometimes people think of businesses like, well, how could a restaurant be location independent? How could a brick and mortar store be location independent? Well, the answer is they cannot. So you have to consider the kind of business that you start. Consulting is an easy option, right? If you have enough experience, you know that you can go work for a variety of clients, fixing their broken stuff, whatever that is. That's a viable path. People don't often care that consultants are on site. Maybe they want you on site for a kickoff meeting.
Yeah.
But that's just one option. There are many options. But I think if you're trying to be a remote employee, you can do that. But there's risk. There's a lot of, and we just been through this giant knee jerk of companies saying, we think remote's here to stay. And then two years later, they're bringing people back to the office.
Interesting. All right. You and I talked offline a little bit about this, that companies really want to hire the low risk candidate when they're shopping. What does that mean? Why don't you talk us through that?
I'm glad you asked this question, Jim, because I think this is really, really important. When you're interviewing for a position, I think a lot of people think that the company is always going to hire the best talent. They're going to hire the one that can do the job the best, the most qualified person. And in case the audience doesn't know me well, right now I work my own company. It's called Salary Coach, and I help to guide people through the interview process, get selected, and negotiate the best possible pay package so you're not leaving any money on the table. So I've been doing that for the last 3 years. But before that, I was the head of global recruiting for multiple Fortune 500s. So I've been through on the inside, I've been through those debrief meetings. Hiring manager interviews 5 people. Okay, which one of these do you want to hire? I think this person is the strongest. And it turns out they hired number 3 on my list, and I want to know why.
Mm.
So here's what I've discovered through my time, my many years, couple of decades in those meetings, thousands and thousands of them. Hiring managers will hire the low risk candidate because they are afraid of making a hiring mistake. That's the worst thing that can happen to a leader. Well, there's probably, that might be hyperbole, but let's say you're a leader and you hire the wrong person.
Mm.
Now 30% of your day for the next 3 years is untangling the issues that result from that bad hire.
Yeah.
You have low morale on your team because they've lost trust in you. They feel betrayed. They don't like this new coworker, things like that. And your boss now starts to question whether you have the judgment to be a leader. If you can't even pick the right people, like, so
Yeah.
if you do that more than once, you might actually lose your leadership role.
Yeah.
The stakes are incredibly high, and the stakes are personal too. So if a leader hires the wrong person, they have all these goals, all these things that they're on the hook to do. Those goals drive their incentive payments, their bonuses. People are selfish. They don't want to put their bonus at risk.
Mm.
So they will hire the person that is very unlikely to embarrass them or to be a bad fit. They'll do
Mm.
that before they will hire the person that could be the high flyer, the super high achiever, but that comes with risk. So this is why companies, like when you're interviewing, you see that they want to interview you 7 times before making a decision, because they're terrified of making a hiring mistake and they're being hyper vigilant about it. They also want to involve the whole world in the hiring decision, so that if there is a hiring mistake, they can spread the blame across 5 or 6 other people.
I like that.
Yeah, some companies too make it extremely difficult to fire people. So if
Yeah.
you do make a hiring mistake, you can't undo that mistake. It takes
Yeah.
you 6 or 8 months of crazy extra level horrible confrontational work.
Yeah.
So the easiest thing to do is to be extremely conservative and hire the low risk person. So
Hmm.
you have to understand as a candidate that they're afraid of making a hiring mistake. And then when you're interviewing with somebody, a great strategy is to reassure them that you're not that mistake. Before you can really do that effectively, though, you have to find out what a hiring mistake really looks like from their perspective.
Right.
So, yeah, I coach people to ask this question: what would happen to you if you hired the wrong person for this job?
Mm.
And you might not get the whole truth. They might not say, well, I wouldn't hit my bonus, but they
Yeah.
might say this customer relationship could fall apart, or the team chemistry could be disrupted, or something like that. And then once you know that, then you can start saying, well, I'm a great team chemistry person. This is how I support the team, or that project will never fall apart, or that customer relationship will never fall apart. Let me tell you how I inherited a difficult customer relationship at my last job, and I turned that around. Now
Okay.
you can sell into this insecurity that people have, and you can become the low risk candidate if you do stuff like this.
We're going to move on to one more topic, and just before I do, I want to remind the audience that if you have any questions, now is the time. Go into the comments box, upper right-hand corner of your screen, and type it in, and we'll answer as many as we can. But we have one more that we thought of. I love this graphic, by the way. How do you maintain visibility if you're working offsite, whether it's hybrid or remote? You're effectively invisible, right? They can't see you. They don't know what you're doing. Right? It's tough to evaluate. That's what we've been talking about. So what should they do?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think before we answer that question, we should assess, at least be honest about the risks
Yeah.
of being remote. If they can't lay eyes on you, they don't know what you're doing, and your results start to kind of waver around a little bit, their imagination will fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
they'll start to think, well, you're not working. Maybe you got a second job, you're not focused, you're not doing the thing, right? But there's also this thing about political sponsorship when it comes to getting promoted, things like this. Like we just talked about low risk people, but there's something about being present with someone else in the same space that helps to build a relationship and build trust. And if you're remote, it's harder to do that stuff. And that's why the local person is more likely to get promoted than the remote person.
Mm.
So remote can be a good choice for you if you are okay with accepting that risk. So the question here is, how do you maintain visibility? Like part of that question could be like, how do you offset that problem if you are remote? I think it's good to be present physically periodically. I think that'll help you politically. It'll help you to integrate with the team and things like that. If you are committed to being fully remote, you're never going to see me in person, then you're accepting certain risks.
With all
But
the technology that's out there, John, especially the video technology, I was thinking about this. I would advocate for people working offsite, whether it's hybrid or remote, to a little over communication. Make sure you're going to these video meetings and turn your camera on. It's they get very suspect when you're there, but they can't see you. It's like, well, what are you doing? You watching TV? You playing with the dog? What are you doing?
Jim, I think that's wonderful advice. And here's another thing that I thought of as well. Sometimes you can, like you have lunch with people, or you go to lunch with people when you're in person. You can do that virtually too.
Yeah.
Like you could schedule, like you and I could say, hey, you're going to have lunch today. I'm going to have lunch today. How about we just get on camera and we'll have lunch together. We'll do a virtual lunch. Are you down with that? And we don't have to talk about business. In fact, I don't want to talk about business. Let's
I'd like,
just
I'd
have
like
lunch
that. I'd
together.
like that. If you can attach like a cookie or something and send it to me.
Let's just have lunch together. I can see what you're eating. You can see what I'm eating. And you can tell me what you're going to do this weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes those online meetings, they turn out to be like a little too efficient,
Hmm.
where you're not making that personal connection. There's no small talk. It's just like right into the agenda and you bounce out. And that, I think, finding that personal connection, it's like, oh, you're going to a concert this weekend. Which band do you like? And why do you like them? And, you're riding a motorcycle this weekend. Wow, that's cool. I like to do that too, but I'm going scuba diving, or I'm just going to lay around, or my grandmother is sick. I'm going to go take care of her. And it's those little small talk things that you can make room for just by doing a virtual lunch. Don't think that you have to be isolated when you are remote or hybrid. You can do these kind of things too. And it helps you to maintain that human connection. And like, I do think though, your idea of don't mute your camera.
Well, that and also quick answers. I find if somebody texts you or emails you, and you're sitting there and you can't answer it. Answer it. Don't let it sit there for 3 hours. 'Cause, again, they're wondering, well, why didn't they answer? What are they doing?
I think that's good. And those tools like Slack and Teams that
Exactly.
allow that and things like that, use those. Absolutely use those, because if you don't, and it's all asynchronous email communication back and forth, that may lead them to this idea again that you're not sitting at your desk doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. And I know it's silly. Your results can speak for themselves, and they should, but that's not how a lot of people evaluate performance.
Mm.
They have a question. If you think about it this way: somebody has a question. They want to walk down to your cubicle or poke their nose into your office and say, "Hey, do you happen to know if this is true, or where can I find X?" Then in a real-time environment, you can do that, and it's easy. You need to simulate that when you are working from home and using these chat tools and stuff like that. You need to make it easy for people to get you, to talk to you, to get information from you, to share information to them, and back and forth.
John, great stuff. I appreciate you hanging in there. We've run a little bit over, but I think it was well worth it. It's about 12:43, and let me remove this banner. There we go. Any last thoughts? Any last pearls of wisdom? So people, they want to land that hybrid or remote job. We've covered a lot of ground here today. I think a lot of good ideas. Over communicating, real time communication. I loved your idea too. If you're local in any way, if even if you're offsite a couple hours away from the office, go in there once in a while. Go there for lunch, go there for an event, go there for a quarterly meeting, whatever. I think that's probably the best of both worlds today is 2 days, 3 days remote, and maybe a couple of days on site. You have some presence.
Sure,
But
sure.
when you're working remote, yeah, you have to be seen. You have to compensate, I think, by over communicating, being a little bit more responsive.
Yeah. And I guess my final pearl of wisdom here would be we know what people think might be happening, what they suspect might be happening. Imagine in your mind what an abuser of remote work would do and look like and be like. Don't show, even if you're not abusing that, don't show up in a way that allows somebody to think that might be you. Right?
Yeah.
So that you talked about lack of responsiveness. That's one thing that even if you're killing it, if you're unresponsive, if somebody's been trying to ping you for the last 4 hours and you're not responding, it makes them imagine that the worst case scenario may be true with you. That's always lurking in the back of a supervisor's mind. That's the thing that they're worried about, the thing that they don't want to be blamed for. And so,
with all these tools though, like the Teams and Zoom and StreamYard, that are out there today, text messages, it's possible to stay pretty much in real-time communication with your leadership team, with whoever you report to, right? And so think about you're offsite, and you're the manager and you've got somebody offsite, and you have a question for them, and you ask it, and boom, you get an answer in like 60 seconds. You're gonna feel pretty good about that. It's like, oh wow, they really are there. They really are working.
absolutely.
Not that they can do that every time, but even if that's just occasionally or 50% of the time that you're that responsive, that's going to earn you some cred, I think.
Absolutely. And people don't always have visibility into your calendar. So you can send a message out or put an out of office message up or something like that would say, I'm going to be entrenched with a key client for the next 4 hours. Any messages that come in after that. You have to do a little bit of political self-defense in this world of remote
right
work.
Letting him know where you're at, what you're doing, and then they go, oh, okay, he's in a business meeting, he's at a trade show, he's meeting with a client. Great. Exactly. I like all that. John, fantastic content as always. Thank you so much for spending the time. Thanks to our audience from LinkedIn and X and YouTube. We'll have to do this again. I love this multi-platform streaming. It's a new technology for me personally, and I like it. Very, very cool stuff.
Yep, I like it too. This was fun. So if you ever want to do this again with me, I'm in on it. So we'll just pick another topic and have a good time doing it. Thanks.
To the folks in the chat window, if you want to put your email address in there, I'll make sure to send you the link to this recording of this presentation as well. John, we'll talk to you later. Have a great one. Yep.